Good morning, Rabbi. How are you?
Good morning, Kinoue. Like you, hoping that the pandemic will soon end.
Okay, so tonight in Israel, Memorial Day started. Do you have any thoughts?
Obviously, we have family and friends, and I think for people to understand that we all have Memorial Days all over the world. For a tiny country like Israel, there isn't a family that hasn't been affected. Starting in 1948, the 5 wars that Israel has fought, the war against terrorism, the continued calamities that take place. So it's an intense time of personal grief that's unmatched. If God forbid anybody has lost a child, they have some idea of what it's like. I'm lucky, I've never had that. And at the same time, it's also a time for collective mourning that sets the stage for tomorrow's celebration of Israel Independence Day. And unfortunately this year, because of the pandemic, all of the public aspects and much of the private suffering and mourning will have to be just that, apart. And it makes it an extremely difficult time for these families. But hopefully next year will be different, and also hopefully next year will be a time where we can actually see the early signs of true peace in the Holy Land.
I see. I was there last year, so I know how moving it was. But today, I want you to speak about your work, many years of work in relating to Japan. And first of all, how many times have you been to Japan, if you haven't lost count yet?
I think, probably over 30 times, usually very short visits. But I can say that I always learn something new on each trip. I'm not an expert on Japan. I'm a friend of Japan and always learning more from the Japanese people, from their culture and their worldview, which is a unique one.
Okay. I'm sure many visits are memorable, meaningful, but were there any particular visit that you think is very special?
I think 2 visits come to mind. One is the very first time I was in Japan. I went to a bookstore at the Hilton Hotel in Tokyo, and I saw 2 books referring to the Jewish world right next to each other. One was The Diary of Anne Frank, a very important book for millions of Japanese. And the other is an anti-Semitic book called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And yet they were being sold literally right next to each other. That was back in the year 1985. Things have changed dramatically, mostly for the good today, not only because of the internet, but many fine books have been written in Japanese or translated into Japanese. So if people have a curiosity about Jews, Judaism, Israel, they can find ways to get that information. Plus, of course, in normal times now, there's more tourism between the countries. I think the single greatest moment for me, and there have been many of them, was the opening of our Holocaust exhibition at City Hall in Shinjuku, Tokyo, in which the ribbon was cut by a fellow by the name of Walter Mondale, who was the former Vice President of the United States, the US Ambassador to Japan, and the late sainted, wonderful Mrs. Sugihara. And to also see the outpouring of interest and solidarity from the people of Japan, because we brought some personal writings from Anne Frank that were included in that special exhibition. 82,000 people came in 11 days.
Wow.
And that revealed to us how little we really knew about the Japanese people, how profound the curiosity and the thirst for real knowledge was, and really inspired us to expand our efforts and take a broader approach in our outreach to Japan.
I see. So regarding your approach, has it changed or evolved? I remember you talked about that moment that you were asked, so what do you do in the synagogue? Can you tell us
Yes,
about that?
yes. The day that my job description was changed was when the vice president of a very prominent publishing company in Japan, uh, who was together with 75 of his leading colleagues at a session in which I just finished explaining why the Protocols of Zion is so false and why it would have been such a huge error for them to go ahead and publish another Japanese version of it. And I spoke for 40 minutes, and then the vice president stood up and he said, we have a question, which is quite unusual after a lecture in Japan. And he said, well, thank you for explaining that Jewish people don't go to their temple, their synagogue on your Sabbath in order to plot the economic downfall of Japan. And he went on to explain all the other points, major points that we debunked, like we don't control all the banks. And no, the media is not controlled globally by the Jewish people. But his question changed everything. He said, well, could you please tell us, what do Jews do when you go to synagogue on Sabbath? And that question is the one that I've spent most of my energies in the ensuing years, which has to do about values. We're different culturally. We look different, we think differently, we speak differently, but we have some really profound universal values about our love for family and children and beauty. You learn a lot along the way. And the opportunity to actually explain what are the values that motivate Jewish people? And also, by the way, how is it that someone who is a proud American citizen living in Los Angeles cares so much about this tiny little place in the Middle East that's called the Land of Israel? And in that sense, I think the process that is currently underway and now gaining speed as more young Japanese and more young Israelis are attracted to each other for business, but also for other reasons. I think that the virus, the fact that it came from China and the response, the irresponsible response of the Chinese government, is a reminder, especially to Americans and Japanese, is that what brings us together also, and the Israelis, we have democracies. Democracies don't lie to each other. They don't go to war with each other. They cooperate with each other. So I think the day after this pandemic, and may it come soon, the opportunity for even greater cooperation is there. It won't be from my end in the business domain. That's not my business. But the idea of creating and then deepening ties in which we learn about the unique culture and aspects and language that we all have. But when we dig a little bit deeper, we're also going to find the universal values, of love and beauty and solidarity that will be the cement for closer relations for a long, long time to come.
Thank you. So you are hopeful that the relationship of Jewish people and Japanese people, and particularly these days Israel, and we will have a good prospect for creating a friendship and understanding, and that's your job, to promote understanding in Japan. And I've been seeing you do the job many, many years, and I think we were lucky to have a person like you caring about Japan and Japanese people. And so I'm very honored to witness and sometimes working with you. And hopefully after this coronavirus passes, we're going to have many more your visit. And I'm very hopeful that you'll be continuing to this very important job working with the Japanese people.
Right. Well, Kidaway, as always, you're very modest. You've been an important ally, friend, and guide to this terminal American to really broaden the way I look at things and to be able to open myself to understand a lot more about Japan and therefore have access to more of the people in Japan. And I look forward when the Olympics are convened, please God, next summer, to bringing one or two of our exhibitions, one on the Holocaust and one on the history of the State of Israel, to Japan to during the time that, God willing, the world will convene for the 2020 Olympics, albeit a little bit late. But you and I are patient.
Yes.
We look forward to that opportunity.
Okay, thank you so much and have a good day. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.
All the best to our friends in Japan.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.